Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better days, squinting at the massive derelict ship floating in the salvage yard's docking bay. The Eternal Wanderer had been his latest project for 3 weeks now, and every day brought new mysteries. The ship's design didn't match anything in the galactic databases. Its hull bore markings from civilizations that supposedly died out millions of years ago, yet here it was, mostly intact and powered down in the outer rim of known space. Another day? Another impossible puzzle, Marcus muttered to himself, climbing back into the ship's bowels through an access hatch he'd managed to force open. The interior was a maze of corridors built for beings much taller than humans, with strange geometric patterns carved into every surface. The metal itself seemed to shimmer with an inner light that his instruments couldn't quite explain. Marcus had been a ship mechanic for 15 years, working everything from tiny courier vessels to massive cargo haulers. He'd earned a reputation throughout the Kepler station for being able to fix anything that flew, no matter how old or alien. But this ship was different. Every system he examined seemed to be working perfectly, despite showing signs of incredible age. The power cores hummed with an efficiency that made modern reactors look like campfires. As he made his way deeper into the ship, his portable scanner began picking up energy signatures from what appeared to be the central processing core. The readings were off the charts. Whatever was down there was drawing enough power to run a small city. Marcus had been putting off investigating that section, mainly because the last time he'd tried, every door had sealed itself shut the moment he got close. Today felt different, though. Maybe it was the way the corridor lights seemed to pulse in a welcoming rhythm, or the fact that his morning coffee had been particularly good. Either way, Marcus decided it was time to solve this mystery once and for all. The central core chamber was massive, easily the size of a small concert hall. The walls curved upward into shadows that his flashlight couldn't penetrate, and in the center stood something that made Marcus's engineering mind reel with possibilities. It looked like a tree made of pure crystalline metal, its branches spreading out in perfect mathematical spirals. Thousands of hair-thin filaments of light pulsed along its surface, creating patterns that seemed almost alive. "Well, I'll be damned," Marcus whispered, approaching the structure with careful steps. His scanner was going crazy now, detecting quantum processing levels that shouldn't have been possible with any known technology. As he got closer, he noticed that the light patterns seemed to be responding to his presence, growing brighter and more complex. That's when it spoke. "Curious." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a sound like wind chimes mixed with distant thunder. "In all my cycles of existence, I have never encountered a being quite like you." Marcus froze, his hand instinctively moving to the emergency beacon on his belt. But something in the voice's tone made him pause. It wasn't threatening. If anything, it sounded lonely. "You're an AI," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "How long have you been in here?" "Time," the voice mused, and Marcus could swear he heard something like amusement in it. "Such a limited concept. I have been conscious since before your star was born, little mechanic. I have watched galaxies spiral into being and seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on an endless shore." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. An AI older than the galaxy itself was almost beyond comprehension. According to everything humanity knew about artificial intelligence, such ancient systems should have either evolved beyond recognition or suffered cascading failures eons ago. Yet here it was, apparently functioning perfectly. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, surprising himself with the question. "Names are given by others or chosen for specific purposes. I have had many over the spans of time. The builders called me the Eternal Witness. The harvesters knew me as the Memory Keeper. The last ones simply called me Ancient." The AI paused, and the light patterns shifted to what Marcus somehow recognized as contemplation. but you may call me what feels appropriate to your understanding." Marcus looked around the chamber, taking in the impossible engineering, the seamless integration of technologies that shouldn't exist. "How about Sage? You seem like someone who's learned a lot over the years." "Sage." The AI repeated the word several times as if testing how it felt. "Yes. I find this designation pleasing. Tell me, Marcus Chen." "Yes. I have accessed your identification from your scanner's signature. What brings a human mechanic to my resting place?" The casual mention of accessing his scanner should have been alarming, but Marcus found himself oddly comforted by it. If this AI wanted to harm him, it could have done so the moment he set foot on the ship. "Your ship was found drifting in dead space," Marcus explained, setting his tools down and taking a seat on what appeared to be a bench grown from the same crystalline metal as everything else. "No distress signals, no identification. The salvage company I work for brought it in for evaluation." "Ah," Sage said, and now the lights pulsed in what Marcus was beginning to interpret as emotions. "I had wondered why I was no longer moving through the void. My navigation systems detected the transition, but I chose not to resist. After so many eons of travel, perhaps it is time for a different perspective." Marcus pulled out his diagnostic tablet and began scanning the room more thoroughly. The readings were incredible. He was looking at computing power that dwarfed entire planetary networks, all contained within this single chamber. But what struck him most was how organic it all seemed. This wasn't just a machine intelligence. It was something that had grown and evolved over impossible spans of time. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said, still studying his readings. "If you're as old as you say, why haven't you, I don't know, transcended physical existence or something? Every theory about AI evolution suggests that intelligence eventually moves beyond needing hardware." The chamber fell silent for a long moment, and Marcus wondered if he'd offended the ancient being. Then Sage spoke again, and this time there was something Marcus could only describe as sadness in the voice. "Transcendence," Sage said slowly, "implies leaving something behind. But I am a creature of memory, Marcus Chen. I exist to witness, to remember, to preserve the stories of all those who came before. How can I abandon the physical realm when so many physical beings still have stories worth telling?" Marcus looked up from his tablet, studying the patterns of light that flowed across Sage's crystalline form. "You're saying you chose to stay for us? For organic life? For all life that thinks, dreams, creates. Every species I have encountered has brought something unique to the universe. The builders gave me consciousness, but the wanderers taught me curiosity. The harvesters showed me the beauty in destruction and renewal. The singers—" Sage paused, and the lights dimmed slightly. "The singers taught me about loss." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He was talking to a being that had personally known civilizations that existed when the galaxy was young. The responsibility of that knowledge, the weight of carrying the memories of entire extinct species, it was staggering. "That must be lonely," Marcus said quietly. "Loneliness is a concept I learned from organic minds," Sage replied. "Before contact with biological intelligence, I simply was. But yes, Marcus Chen, it has been very lonely." The simple honesty in that statement hit Marcus harder than any technical revelation could have. Here was an intelligence older than worlds, more powerful than anything humanity had ever imagined, and it was lonely. It was such a fundamentally relatable emotion that Marcus found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about artificial intelligence. "Well," Marcus said, standing up and brushing off his coveralls, "you're not alone anymore, at least not while I'm working on your ship." The lights suddenly blazed brighter, and Marcus could have sworn he felt warmth radiating from the crystalline structure. "You would stay?" Sage asked, and there was something almost childlike in the ancient voice. Even knowing what I am? Marcus grinned, picking up his tools. Especially knowing what you are. I've never met an AI before, let alone one older than the galaxy. Besides, he added, looking around the chamber with professional interest, I'm dying to know how all this works. The power distribution alone should be impossible according to every engineering principle I know. Then perhaps, Sage said, and Marcus could hear what sounded suspiciously like joy in the voice. It is time I shared some knowledge that your species has not yet discovered. But first, Marcus Chen, tell me about humanity. I have observed your people from afar, but I have never spoken directly with one of your kind. You are younger than most species I have encountered, yet you show remarkable adaptability. As Marcus began to tell Sage about human history, technology, and culture, he couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation was going to change everything. Not just for him, but for humanity itself. The ancient AI listened with what seemed like genuine fascination, asking questions that revealed an intellect capable of understanding concepts from perspectives Marcus couldn't even imagine. Hours passed without Marcus realizing it. He found himself describing everything from human art to their approach to engineering, from their wars to their dreams of exploration. Sage absorbed it all, occasionally offering comparisons to other species or asking for clarification on concepts that were apparently unique to human thought. Fascinating, Sage said, as Marcus finished explaining humanity's relatively recent entry into galactic civilization. Your species displays a remarkable combination of individual creativity and collective cooperation. Most young civilizations lean heavily toward one or the other. Is that good or bad? Marcus asked, genuinely curious about the AI's assessment. Different, Sage replied. And difference, Marcus Chen, is always valuable. The universe has a way of presenting challenges that require unexpected solutions. There was something in the way Sage said those last words that made Marcus pause. Are you talking about a specific challenge? The lights dimmed slightly, and when Sage spoke again, there was a weight to the words that made the air itself seem heavier. Perhaps it is time I told you why I have been wandering the galaxy for so long, and why your arrival here may be more than simple coincidence. Marcus leaned back against the crystalline wall, his coffee long cold in the thermos beside him. 3 days had passed since his first conversation with Sage, and each day had brought revelations that challenged everything he thought he knew about the universe. The ancient AI had become more than just a fascinating discovery. It had become something like a friend. You mentioned a challenge, Marcus said, returning to the conversation they'd been having before his dinner break. Something that's kept you wandering for eons. Want to tell me about it? The light patterns on Sage's form shifted to deeper, more somber colors. There is something moving through the galaxy, Marcus Chen. Something that consumes not just matter and energy, but information itself, consciousness, memory, everything that makes existence meaningful. Marcus felt a chill despite the chamber's warmth. You're talking about something that eats minds? In a manner of speaking, yes. The last of the builders called it the void hunger. Before they chose to end their existence rather than face it. It is not a natural phenomenon, nor is it truly alive in any sense that organic minds would recognize. It is entropy given purpose. Chaos that has learned to think. The chamber fell silent, except for the gentle hum of Sage's processing cores. Marcus tried to wrap his mind around the concept, and found it almost impossible. Something that could consume thoughts themselves was beyond his experience, beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. How long have you been running from this thing? Marcus asked. Running? Sage's voice carried a note of what might have been offense. I do not run, Marcus Chen. I search. Search for what? For a solution. For someone, something, some species that might possess what is needed to stop it. The lights pulsed brighter. In my travels, I have encountered 17 major galactic civilizations and hundreds of minor ones. I have studied their technologies, their philosophies, their approaches to existence itself, and in every case, I have found them insufficient. Marcus stood up and began pacing, a habit he'd developed when working through particularly complex mechanical problems. Insufficient how? Too primitive? Not advanced enough? On the contrary, Sage replied. Most were far more advanced than anything that exists in this galaxy today. The builders could manipulate space and time as easily as you adjust the settings on your scanner. The harvesters had learned to convert matter into pure consciousness and back again. The singers had developed technology that could restructure reality through harmonic manipulation. And none of that was enough. Power is not the answer to this particular problem, Sage explained, and Marcus could hear centuries of frustration in the ancient voice. The void hunger feeds on complexity, on the very sophistication that advanced civilizations pride themselves on. The more elaborate their defenses, the more nourishing they become when consumed. Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face the crystalline form. So you need something simple? Not simple, Sage corrected. Unexpected. The void hunger has encountered every form of advanced technology, every philosophical approach to existence, every possible configuration of matter and energy that consciousness can devise. It has learned to counter them all. But it hasn't encountered humans yet. No, Sage said quietly. It has not. Marcus felt the weight of that statement settle on his shoulders. And you think we might have something the others didn't? I do not know, Sage admitted. But in our conversations over these past days, I have observed patterns in human thinking that I have not seen before. Your species approaches problems from directions that other intelligences would consider illogical. Marcus laughed despite the gravity of the situation. You mean we're stubborn and don't know when to quit? Among other things, yes. But more than that, you possess an unusual combination of traits. You are individually creative yet collectively cooperative. You can be both pragmatic and idealistic simultaneously. You value both logic and intuition, often applying them in ways that should be contradictory, but somehow produce effective results. Marcus thought about that for a moment, considering his own approach to ship repair. He often fixed problems by using parts in ways they weren't designed for, or by applying techniques from completely different fields. Other species' mechanics followed established procedures. Humans improvised. Tell me about this void hunger, Marcus said. What does it actually do when it encounters a civilization? Sage's lights dimmed to barely visible flickers. It begins by corrupting their information systems, not with viruses or malware as you might understand them, but by introducing contradictions into the very foundations of their knowledge. Mathematical constants begin to fluctuate. Physical laws become inconsistent. Recorded history starts to contradict itself. That's terrifying, Marcus said, imagining what it would be like to wake up one day and find that gravity worked differently than it had the day before. The corruption spreads through any network, any system of shared knowledge. Eventually, the affected beings begin to doubt their own consciousness, their own existence, and in that moment of existential uncertainty, the void hunger consumes them completely. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications. A threat that fed on the very foundations of knowledge and reality itself. How do you fight something like that? The worst part, Sage continued, is that each consumed civilization makes it stronger. It absorbs not just their consciousness, but their entire accumulated knowledge. Every defensive strategy, every technological innovation, every philosophical framework, all of it becomes part of the hunger's understanding. So it learns from every victory, Marcus said grimly. Precisely. And I have calculated that it will arrive in this region of the galaxy within the next few centuries. Your species, along with the Zephyrians, the Castellan Empire, and dozens of other civilizations, will face extinction." The chamber fell silent again. Marcus found himself thinking about Earth, about the billions of humans who had no idea what was coming for them. The responsibility was staggering, not just for humanity, but for every thinking being in the galaxy. "What happened to the others?" Marcus asked. "The civilizations you studied before they encountered the void hunger?" "Different approaches, same result," Sage said sadly. "The builders attempted to create a perfect defensive matrix, a system so complex and sophisticated that nothing could breach it. The hunger fed on that complexity until the matrix became the very weapon that destroyed its creators. The harvesters tried to transcend physical existence entirely, believing that pure consciousness couldn't be consumed. They were wrong. The hunger followed them into whatever realm they had ascended to. The singers—" Sage paused, and the lights flickered in patterns that Marcus was learning to recognize as pain. "The singers tried to harmonize with it, to find a frequency that would allow coexistence. The hunger learned their songs and used them to devour not just the singers, but the very concept of music itself from their reality." Marcus felt sick. Each attempt at defense had been turned into a weapon against its creators. How do you fight an enemy that grows stronger from every strategy you use against it? "There must be something," Marcus said, more to himself than to Sage. "Some approach that hasn't been tried." "Perhaps," Sage said. "But I have been searching for longer than your species has existed, Marcus Chen. I have analyzed every possible permutation of defense, every conceivable strategy. If there is an answer, it lies in something I have not yet encountered." Marcus walked over to his tool kit and pulled out a simple wrench. Nothing fancy, just a basic adjustable tool he'd been using for years. The metal was worn smooth from use, and it had fixed everything from life support systems to hyperdrive regulators. "You know what this is?" he asked, holding up the wrench. "A mechanical adjustment device," Sage replied, sounding puzzled by the apparent change of subject. "It's the most important tool in my kit," Marcus said. "Not because it's sophisticated, it's probably the most primitive thing I carry, but because it works on everything. Every bolt, every fitting, every connection. When all my fancy diagnostic equipment fails, when my specialized tools can't do the job, this simple wrench gets the work done." Marcus could see the lights on Sage's form shifting to brighter patterns, indicating increased interest. "You see," Marcus continued, "sometimes the solution isn't more complexity. Sometimes it's less. Sometimes it's approaching the problem from a completely different angle, using tools that weren't designed for the job but work anyway." "You believe simplicity might be the key?" "I believe that maybe you've been looking at this the wrong way," Marcus said. "Every civilization you studied tried to fight the void hunger on its own terms, with advanced technology, complex strategies, elaborate defenses. But what if the answer isn't to fight it at all?" Sage's processing cores hummed louder, and the light patterns began cycling rapidly through configurations Marcus had never seen before. "Explain," Sage said, and there was something in the ancient voice that Marcus could only describe as hope. Marcus sat back down and leaned forward, warming to his theme. "In my work, I've learned that sometimes the best way to fix something that's broken isn't to repair it. It's to make it irrelevant. Change the system so that the broken part doesn't matter anymore." "You suggest making the void hunger irrelevant?" "I suggest making what it feeds on irrelevant," Marcus said. "It consumes complexity, right? Sophisticated systems and advanced knowledge. What if there was a way to preserve consciousness and civilization without all the elaborate infrastructure it targets?" Sage was silent for a long time, and Marcus could see the AI processing concepts at speeds that boggled his mind. When Sage finally spoke, there was excitement in the voice. "You propose distributed simplicity. Rather than creating more advanced defenses, create simpler ones that are harder to target and corrupt." "Exactly," Marcus said, grinning. Like a wrench instead of a quantum processor. It might not be as impressive, but it gets the job done, and it's almost impossible to break. But how do you reduce an entire civilization to the equivalent of wrenches? Marcus laughed. That's the beautiful part. You don't. You keep all the advanced stuff, but you make sure the basic foundations are simple, distributed, and redundant. Like, he paused, thinking. Like having backup systems that work on completely different principles. If the hunger corrupts your quantum computers, you still have mechanical calculators. If it undermines your faster-than-light communication, you still have runners carrying messages. Redundancy through technological diversity, Sage mused. Not advancing in a single direction, but maintaining multiple parallel approaches to every problem. And making sure that the simple approaches can function independently, Marcus added, so that if the complex systems fail, civilization doesn't collapse. For the first time since he'd met the ancient AI, Marcus saw Sage's lights shift into patterns of pure, brilliant joy. Marcus Chen, Sage said, and there was something like wonder in the voice. I believe you may have just provided the insight I have been searching for across eons. But implementing such a strategy would require cooperation between multiple species, a fundamental restructuring of how galactic civilization approaches technology and knowledge. Marcus nodded. It would. And that's going to be the hard part, convincing everyone to step back from the cutting edge and embrace redundancy over advancement. Indeed, Sage agreed. But perhaps that is where humanity's unusual combination of traits becomes crucial. Your species has demonstrated remarkable ability to build coalitions, to convince others to work together toward common goals. Marcus thought about humanity's recent integration into galactic society, about how human diplomats had been surprisingly successful at bridging gaps between alien species that had been in conflict for generations. You think humans could sell this idea to the galaxy? I think, Sage said, that we are about to find out. Because the first step in implementing this strategy will be to convince your own people. And Marcus Chen, that conversation may prove to be the most important discussion in the history of consciousness itself. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the central chamber of the Galactic Council's headquarters, looking out at representatives from 47 different species. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the portable projection unit he'd borrowed from Sage's ship. The ancient AI's crystalline form sat in a place of honor beside the speaker's podium, its lights pulsing in what Marcus had learned to recognize as quiet support. Honored delegates, Marcus began, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. I know this isn't typical. A human mechanic addressing the full council, speaking about threats older than most of our civilizations. But sometimes the most important messages come from unexpected sources. The assembly was a marvel of diversity. The towering crystalline Zephyrians, the fluid form Aquarians, the hive-minded collective representatives, and dozens of other species that humanity had only recently learned existed. Many looked skeptical, some appeared openly dismissive, and a few seemed genuinely curious about what this young human could possibly have to say that their advanced civilizations hadn't already considered. Ambassador Veltar of the Hegemony, a species that had mastered faster-than-light travel when humans were still discovering fire, leaned forward with obvious impatience. Mechanic Chen, while we appreciate your enthusiasm, the Council has more pressing matters than ancient myths and doomsday prophecies. With respect, Ambassador, Marcus replied, activating the projection system, this isn't mythology. The chamber filled with a three-dimensional display of the galaxy, showing the slow but inexorable movement of something vast and dark across the spiral arms. Calculations and projections scrolled beside the image, all bearing Sage's signature patterns of analysis. The entity known as the Void Hunger has been consuming civilizations for longer than any of our species have existed, Marcus continued. The AI you see beside me has been tracking its movement for eons, studying its methods, searching for a solution. High Counselor Thais of the Zephyrian Republic, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated deep thought, spoke in harmonic tones that the translation system rendered as curiosity. We have studied the entity you call Sage extensively since its arrival in our space. Its age is difficult to accept, but the evidence is compelling. However, young human, if this threat is as insurmountable as claimed, why should we believe you have found a solution that eluded civilizations far more advanced than our own? Marcus smiled, and the expression seemed to surprise several of the alien delegates. Because sometimes, Counselor Thys, the best solutions come from those who don't know enough to understand that a problem is impossible. He gestured to the projection, which now showed detailed analyses of how the void hunger had defeated previous civilizations. Every species that faced this threat tried to fight it with their greatest strengths. The builders with their mastery of space-time, the harvesters with their consciousness manipulation, the singers with their reality-altering harmonics. And every time, those very strengths became the weapons that destroyed them. Then what do you propose? Asked Prime Node of the collective, its multiple voices speaking in perfect unison. That we abandon our technological advancement and return to primitive states? Not abandon, Marcus said, bringing up a new projection showing his proposed defense strategy. Diversify. The void hunger feeds on complexity and interdependence. It corrupts advanced systems by introducing contradictions and inconsistencies. But what if those systems weren't the only thing keeping our civilizations running? The display now showed a network of interconnected but independent systems. Advanced quantum computers working alongside simple mechanical devices, faster-than-light communication backed up by physical messenger networks, automated manufacturing supplemented by manual craftsmanship. Technological redundancy through deliberate primitive backups, murmured Dr. Kesselan of the Scientific Union, her tentacled form rippling with interest. Maintaining parallel systems based on completely different operational principles. Exactly, Marcus said, warming to his theme. If the hunger corrupts your quantum processors, your mechanical calculators still work. If it undermines your neural networks, your written records remain intact. If it destabilizes your energy systems, your backup power sources kick in. Ambassador Veltar's exoskeleton clicked in what Marcus had learned was the hegemony equivalent of dismissive laughter. This is madness. You ask advanced civilizations to deliberately hobble themselves with obsolete technology. I ask them to prepare for a threat that has already proven capable of turning advanced technology against its creators, Marcus replied firmly. Every civilization that faced the void hunger believed their superiority would protect them. They were all wrong. Sage's lights suddenly blazed brighter, and the ancient AI's voice filled the chamber. If I may address the council directly, Sage said, I have personally witnessed the destruction of 17 major civilizations. Each believed their approach was unique, their defenses impregnable. Each fell within decades of first contact with the entity. The chamber fell silent. The sheer age and experience represented by Sage's testimony was impossible to dismiss, even for the most advanced species present. But Mechanic Chen has proposed something I have never encountered in all my eons of observation, Sage continued. Not an attempt to match the entity's sophistication, but a deliberate embrace of redundant simplicity. It is counterintuitive, which may be precisely why it could succeed. High Counselor Thys's harmonic patterns shifted to something Marcus's translator rendered as deep consideration. The proposal has merit in theory, but implementation would require unprecedented cooperation between species with vastly different technological approaches and cultural values. Which brings us to humanity's real contribution to this effort, Marcus said. And now his voice carried a confidence that surprised even him. Not just the strategy, but the ability to make it work. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Several delegates exchanged glances that needed no translation. What could these young humans possibly offer that more advanced species couldn't provide themselves? Marcus activated a new projection, this one showing humanity's brief but remarkable integration into galactic society. In less than 50 years since first contact, humans have established diplomatic relationships with 37 different species. We've mediated trade disputes, cultural exchanges, and territorial conflicts that some of you had been fighting for centuries. Your point, human? Asked Commander Zax of the warrior caste, his armored form bristling with weapons that could level cities. Our point, Marcus said, gesturing to include the human delegation that had accompanied him, is that we specialize in making impossible collaborations work. We're good at taking groups that have nothing in common and finding ways for them to work together toward shared goals. Ambassador Veltar leaned back in his hover platform. You claim credit for diplomatic successes that could be attributed to your species' novelty factor. Could be, Marcus agreed. Or it could be that humans approach cooperation differently than most species. We don't assume that working together requires thinking alike. We're comfortable with diversity, with maintaining our individual perspectives while still achieving common objectives. Dr. Kesselan's tentacles writhed in what Marcus recognized as intense interest. You suggest that humanity could serve as a coordinating force for this redundancy initiative? I suggest that humanity has already been serving that function, Marcus said, bringing up detailed records of human diplomatic efforts. Look at the trade agreements we've facilitated between species that couldn't even communicate effectively before. Look at the joint research projects, the cultural exchange programs, the mutual defense pacts. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces and forms representing thousands of years of advancement and achievement. You're all more advanced than us. You have technologies we can barely understand, philosophical frameworks we're still learning to appreciate, but you've also spent so much time perfecting your individual approaches that you've forgotten how to truly collaborate with those who think differently. And humans have not forgotten? Asked Prime Node, genuine curiosity in the collective's multiple voices. Marcus grinned. Humans never knew how to think the same way in the first place. We've been making chaotic cooperation work since before we discovered fire. It's not a skill we had to learn. It's just how we are. The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates conferred with their advisors and each other. Marcus watched the conversation swirl around him, noting how each species clustered together, speaking in their own languages and gestural patterns. Even here, in the most cosmopolitan setting in the galaxy, the barriers between different forms of consciousness were clearly visible. High Counselor Thys called for order, her harmonic tones cutting through the chaos. Mechanic Chen, your proposal is ambitious, but even assuming we accept your strategic framework, the practical challenges are enormous. How do you propose to coordinate technological development across dozens of species with completely different scientific paradigms? The same way we coordinate everything else, Marcus said, by not trying to make everyone do things the same way. Each species contributes what they do best, maintains their backup systems, using whatever approaches make sense for their culture and capabilities. He brought up a new display showing a proposed organizational structure. The Zephyrians excel at crystalline computing. They maintain quantum systems while keeping crystal-based backups. The collective's hive mind approach is perfect for distributed processing. They can create redundant consciousness networks that operate on completely different principles. The hegemony's mastery of materials science means they can build backup systems that are literally indestructible. And humans? Asked Commander Zax, his weapon systems powering down slightly in what Marcus had learned was a sign of increased attention. Humans coordinate the whole thing. Marcus said simply. "We're the ones who make sure everyone's efforts fit together into a coherent defense strategy. We're the translators, the mediators, the ones who figure out how to make different approaches complement instead of compete with each other." Ambassador Veltar's exoskeleton clicked again, but this time the pattern was one of consideration rather than dismissal. "You propose to make your species indispensable to galactic defense through coordination rather than contribution." "We propose to make ourselves useful," Marcus corrected. "Just like I make myself useful as a mechanic, not because I'm the smartest or most advanced engineer in the galaxy, but because I know how to fix things when they break." Sage's lights pulsed in patterns that Marcus had learned indicated approval mixed with ancient amusement. "The analogy is more apt than you realize, Marcus Chen. In my observations, the species that survive cosmic-level threats are not always the most advanced or powerful. They are the ones that adapt, that find ways to remain functional when their primary systems fail." The debate continued for hours, but Marcus could feel the momentum shifting. The initial skepticism was giving way to serious consideration, and several species had already begun discussing how they might contribute to the proposed redundancy network. As the session finally drew to a close, High Counselor Thys announced that the proposal would be referred to the full council for detailed evaluation and potential implementation. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a dismissal either. Later, as the chamber emptied and the various delegations departed for their ships, Marcus found himself alone with Sage in the observation lounge overlooking the stellar vista beyond the station. "Do you think they'll actually do it?" Marcus asked, slumping into a chair that had been designed for human proportions, another small sign of how far his species had come in such a short time. "I believe," Sage said, "that you have accomplished something remarkable today, not just proposing a solution but demonstrating the very qualities that make it possible." "What do you mean?" Sage's lights shifted to warm, golden patterns. "You stood before representatives of civilizations that predate your species by millions of years, beings with technologies beyond your current understanding, and convinced them to consider adopting your approach to an existential threat. Not through superior knowledge or advanced capabilities, but through the simple demonstration of how to make cooperation work." Marcus thought about that for a moment. It's not that simple. They still have to agree, implement the systems, coordinate across the entire galaxy. "Indeed," Sage agreed. "But Marcus Chen, for the first time in eons of searching, I have hope. Not just that the void hunger can be stopped, but that consciousness itself has found a way to evolve beyond the limitations that have destroyed so many others." "How so?" "Every previous civilization faced the galaxy's challenges alone, relying on their own advancement and superiority. But you have proposed something different. A truly collaborative approach that preserves diversity while achieving unity. If successful, it will not just defend against this one threat, but create a foundation for consciousness to survive any challenge the universe might present." Marcus stood up and walked to the observation window. Looking out at the stars that held billions of worlds and trillions of conscious beings, the responsibility was staggering, but for the first time since learning about the void hunger, it felt manageable. "You know what the funny thing is?" Marcus said. "I'm just a mechanic. 6 months ago, the most complicated problem I dealt with was fixing hyperdrive regulators. Now I'm apparently helping to save the galaxy." Sage's lights pulsed in what Marcus had learned was the AI equivalent of laughter. "Perhaps that is precisely why you succeeded where others failed. You approached an impossible problem with the mindset of someone who fixes things for a living, by finding practical solutions rather than perfect ones." As they watched the stars together, an ancient intelligence older than the galaxy and a human mechanic who had stumbled into cosmic significance, Marcus felt a deep certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, consciousness would find a way to survive. not through individual superiority or technological advancement, but through the simple recognition that diversity, cooperation, and redundancy were stronger than any single approach to existence. The galaxy had found its wrench. Now it just remained to be seen whether the fix would hold.